Hi everybody. So the past few days have been showing you how to get your equation from standard form into factored form. This day we are going to show you, once you get your equation into factored form, how you can find your zeros, also known as your roots or x-intercepts. So first I want to review, starting in the top left, what are zeros, roots, or x-intercepts? The zeros, which are known as the roots or x-intercepts, are where your parabola crosses the x-axis. So here's our parabola, and this is the x-axis. For the quadratic function y equals x minus 3 times x plus 2, the zeros are -2, 0, and 3, 0. So one of our zeros is at -2, 0, and the other one is at 3, 0. And remember, we can see that from our equation because we have x minus 3, and so our root would be +3, and we have x plus 2, so our root would be -2. So whatever sign it is in the equation, it turned out opposite on our graph. So that's kind of the old way we were using to find our roots. Still very useful. But number 2 says we can also solve for the zeros using our equations. When we are on our x-axis, so when we are on our x-axis, our y equals 0. So any point on this x-axis, it's going to be a number, comma, 0, because we haven't gone up anything and we haven't gone down anything. So anything on the x-axis has y equal to 0. So I'm going to highlight that in our sentence. So we can set our y equals 0 in our equation and solve for x to see what our roots would be, or our zeros. So for example, in the same equation we used above in the top left, we're going to rewrite it a second time, but this time instead of y, we're going to put a 0. So all we did was replace y with 0. Anything multiplied by 0 is going to be equal to 0. So notice we have two things that are multiplying each other right now. And we're saying whatever this side is, it has to equal 0. So either we would need the x minus 3 to be 0. So on the left middle, we said x minus 3 equals 0. That would mean instead of x minus 3, we would have a 0. 0 times anything is going to be 0, and we know 0 equals 0. So in that case, we would be good. Or we could say x plus 2 equals 0. Because if x plus 2 is 0, x minus 3 times 0 has got to be 0. and 0 equals 0. So either x minus 3 needs to equal 0, or x plus 2 needs to equal 0. So I think it'll make more sense once we do an example problem. So the example says, find the zeros for f of x equals x minus 3, x plus 2. So the first step we need to do is set y equal to 0, which is also known as setting f of x equal to 0. And we do this because we want the x's that are on the x-axis. So instead of f of x, I'm going to put 0. The second step is get equation in factored form. If you look at our equation, it's already in factored form. So I'm just going to rewrite it for this step because if it was in a different form, we would need to factor it, but it's already in factored form. The second thing is we need to separate into two equations. Remember, we either needed x minus 3 to equal 0, or we needed x plus 2 to equal 0. So now we've separated into two equations. Either x minus 3 is 0 or x plus 2 is 0. Our last step is to solve for x. So I'm going to draw a line for each equation. We want to get x by itself. The opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So we have x, negative 3 plus 3 is 0, equals 0 plus 3 is 3. And then this plus 0 isn't doing anything really, so I can rewrite that as x equals 3. Or, for this equation, we need to subtract 2 from both sides. X plus 0 equals 0 minus 2 is negative 2. So x equals negative 2. And I always like to write these as points. So this would be 3 when y is 0. And the other end would be negative 2, 0. And if we scroll back up to the very top, that's the same thing we found on the graph, 3, 0, and -2, 0. So we're solving for our x-intercepts, also called our zeros. And that's it. You guys are going to try these problems on your own. There's 8 problems and they get progressively harder. Only in that we give you a little more structure in the beginning. So in the first one, we already set it equal to 0, separated it into 2 equations, and you just need to solve for x. And then the next one, we just give you a little less steps. So each time you'll have to do a little bit more on your own. Okay? Please let me know if you have any questions. That's all. Thanks for watching. Bye.